Welcome to the Animals Around the Globe expedition.
Welcome to the Animals Around the Globe podcast. We have a special guest today, John Varty, who has an incredible connection with both wildlife and South African history.
So John Varty is the leading force behind South Africa's Tiger Canyon and the famous Londolozi Game Reserve, which is ranked across the top 10 in the world. And he also knew Nelson Mandela very well and has some very interesting stories about his time on Robben Island, and later when Nelson Mandela actually visited him in the Londolozi Game Reserve.
And apparently John also played a vital role in saving Mandela's life later on. And not only that, he's fighting poaching of animals by empowering the local community around wildlife reserves. And yeah, from tigers in Africa to Mandela's legacy, join us on this exciting journey with John Varty.
It's great to have you here on the podcast. And if we look at the notes, I think you said you've been 13 times to a hospital, 14 times malaria. I see 3 crushed vertebrae from a helicopter crash, 4 broken ribs from a tiger attack. You had battled cancer, fought malaria, as I said. So quite a story, like crazy. So maybe, do you just want to start telling a little bit about yourself?
As a kid, I grew up on a game farm next to Kruger National Park. And my father was a hunter and his father was a hunter. So I grew up in a hunting environment. But my father died very young, 1968. I was only 18 years old. And pretty much when he died, the gun was replaced by the camera. In order to keep our game farm, we had to earn some kind of income. And so we went into ecotourism in a very, very modest kind of way. We had 4 little mud huts. It was the only accommodation we had. I used to take kids out into the bush on game trails, sleeping out in the bush. But gradually we built up. Our farm originally was called Sparta. We changed the name to Londolozi, which means the protector of living animals. And today, Londolozi is world famous. It's won the best game reserve 4 times.
Wow.
And then it was a pretty defining moment after about 10, 11 years doing ecotourism. I went into filming.
Nice.
And filmmakers were hiring me to write the scripts for them. And eventually I decided to actually start doing the filming myself. And I spent 17 years in the Maasai Mara, following the migration, 17 consecutive years.
Wow.
And then I was in Luangwa in Zambia for 14 years. And that was a fantastic time in my life. And then in the year of 2000, I started a project which is an ex situ conservation project to help save the wild tiger. And that was called Tiger Canyons. And I did that for 17 years as well. And then I stepped down from Tiger Canyons and I started a project which involves some rural girls. I formed a band called the Tigers. And we play crossover music. We sing in Shangaan and English. And we do a lot of protest singing. And that project is an upliftment project. The idea is through the band is to uplift the band members. The band members are all rural girls. They live in villages on the western side of Kruger Park. They're all single mothers. They live in houses without water. They try to grow their own food. They pretty much live at the whim of nature. And so I started that 5 years ago. And that band now got some professional musicians in it. And we're aiming to become an international protest unit that plays protest music It plays fundraising concerts for endangered species. And we're aiming to make it a powerful force. With the 36 documentaries that I made during that time, I have the largest private wildlife library in the world. I used to film on film, and when I stopped filming on film, I had 4.7 million feet of film. And now I film on digital, obviously, and I have over 100 hard drives on digital. So it's a huge library. And when we play, the band plays in front of two big screens, two large screens, 3-meter screens, and we project imagery which is connected to the lyrics of the song. And the whole project, the whole concert is a powerfully driven environmental message. It's uplifting, it's entertaining, and it's inspiring.
Nice.
And that's my present project. So that's what I'm doing right now. And my band will meet, the new band with the professional musicians will meet for the first time tomorrow in White River. I have a headquarters in White River, which is a town near to where I am. And we will meet there for the first time. Some of the band actually haven't met the rural girls, and we will meet for the first time tomorrow in White River.
Nice. And what, like touching on this point, like what are you protesting against exactly?
We protest the impact that human beings are having on the planet, deforestation, desertification, cruelty to animals, both domestic and wild animals, endangered species, the plight of the tiger, black rhino. We raise money for black rhino, the Cape hunting dog. Any project that we think is worthwhile, we'll get involved in. We'll play concerts. We'll give the proceeds of the concerts or a percentage of the proceeds of the concerts to the organization that's, trying to save the endangered species. So we're involved in many things, planting of trees, the catchment of rivers, anything that we think is worthwhile, we'll play.
That's amazing. And how do you think does an individual can contribute to saving animals, wild animals?
I think one of the movies that has inspired me the most is David Attenborough's Life on the Planet, A Lifetime on the Planet, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what we say and what Attenborough says in that movie is that we have to re-partnership with planet Earth. We've lost that partnership. When we were coming out of living in caves and when we were hunter-gatherers, we were very much part of nature. The Amazonian Indians are still living with nature. Of course, the Plains Indians that lived with the American buffalo were great naturalists. And as we've moved into large cities and we've become civilized, in inverted commas, that connection and that partnership with nature has been lost largely with many, many millions of people around the world. And we need to reconnect with Mother Nature, and we need to re-partnership. And so in our concert, we talk about, for example, the way we get our food, the way we grow our food. What's happening right now, the price of oil is going up and up and up. For example, the members of my band, they can't afford to catch the taxi. And if they could even get to the supermarket to buy the food, they don't have the money to afford the food prices. And they live on the side of Kruger Park where there's literally thousands and thousands of animals walking around.
Yeah.
Now, if they can't afford to go to the supermarket, the only way they can get their food is going to the Kruger Park and catch it or poach it. If their brothers or cousins decide to go and shoot a rhino, they could make enough money to feed the family for a year if they successfully hunted and sold the horn of the rhino. So this is the kind of things we're talking about. We're building a museum at the moment, which is a futuristic museum. And on the roof of the museum, we're growing our own food, just like the Chinese do. We're doing vertical agriculture. We're looking at how our rivers are being destroyed, the deforestation, monocultures, how we're destroying the diversity of nature and creating, maize crops and rice crops and wheat schemes. If you fly over the United States, like I did 12 years ago, flew for 3 hours in a small plane over those huge wheat schemes in the United States. Those are the kind of things which we are protesting against. The destruction of the diversity of nature and to try to feed this rising human population, which will be 10 billion people by the year of 2050.
Yeah, crazy. That's a very good cause. I mean, incredible. I mean, what you already said, looking back at your history, I think you co-founded the Londolozi Game Reserve with your brother together, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that, how that started.
Well, we grew up, my father was a hunter, and he had a game farm where the family would go once a year, and we would hunt for about a month.
Mm-hmm.
And he died very young. He was only 55 years old when he died. And after he died, the people advising my mother advised them to sell the game farm, get the money, and pay for our education. And we pleaded with my mother not to do that. And I was only 18 years old at the time. I would have probably followed a professional sporting career. And I persuaded my mother to allow us to start ecotourism, to take people into the bush. Our first safaris, we charged 3 rands a day, if you can believe that.
Wow, that's
the good old days.
Yeah. And then we went to 8 rands a day. That was a major step for us. And today, if you can believe it, I mean, you guys work in dollars and euros, but we charge around 15,000 rands a day, which is, say, $1,500 a day. And we're running at 92% occupancy.
Oh, wow.
So it's become very, very famous. And Londolozi at times is booked up 2 years in advance. I mean, if you wanted to book Christmas 2026, you would have to book now,
Wow.
But more importantly, we employ 250 people. We feed over 1,000 people a day. And we have 5 schools outside Londolozi, which we finance, which are all education using high tech.
Wow.
And when you're in South Africa, I'd like to show you the schools and show you the whole project. And so, we have a huge impact on the lives of many, many people.
Mm-hmm.
And we can only do that if we are running a high occupancy. When we were in lockdown after COVID, we couldn't operate for 11 months.
Yeah.
And during that time, many people lost their jobs. Obviously, we had no income, so we couldn't pay the salaries. And it came to an absolutely grinding halt.
Mm.
So this is the success of Londolozi. It's not only a tremendous eco-tourist destination, it's a model for the way forward. And many, many lodges across the African continent have picked up on the Londolozi model.
Nice.
And are doing the same as what we're doing now.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I think it's always incredible if you can show the locals how to make use of the wildlife, for example, or the nature, to actually show foreigners and earn their living and their wages with that, right? I think that's what you guys
we've been able to invest rural people in wildlife. My best friend, he's actually here staying with me now. He's not right here. Maybe I'll try to call him. When I hired him, he was 19 years old. He was the most famous poacher in this area.
Oh, wow.
And he became my tracker. And he has made those documentary films with me, all 36. He traveled to Kenya 17 years, consecutive years with me. He is a very not only a very fine tracker, but he learned how to roll a camera. He's a very fine cameraman. And we are making our last movie to that now. I'm 73 years old, and he didn't know when he was born. So when he got a passport, we traveled on forged passport originally. I made him the same age as me. So we are now making our last movie together. It's called The Last Waltz.
That's amazing. And
yeah, I'll ask the girls to call him Laddie. Just and Kumbelo and a Biza Elman, I'm going to put him in a Wula. Okay. They're going to call him now so he can talk to you in the screen.
That's
okay.
Amazing. Was he able to help with like mitigating poaching in your reserve?
What he's been able to do is because he lives outside Londolozi, he's able to tell me and show me how rural people live, how they think, how the poachers operate. And he often negotiates. He's a go-between between the communities on the outside and Londolozi on the inside. And so that's where he's very valuable in that he guides me. He says, look, this is how you must do it. You know, he's allowed me to understand how rural communities work. And then I'm able to infiltrate into the communities.
So he switched sides, kind of, because you gave him the opportunity to do, right?
Yeah, before he would kill a leopard. Now he understands if he keeps the leopard alive, we can find it for this bunch of tourists. They pay him a tip because of his tracking skills. And the next group come in and the leopard's still alive. Yep. Whereas if you poach the leopard or hunt the leopard's gone and all of that potential is gone.
Yep.
So he's been able to make the transition from poacher to tracker.
That's
and
nice
in his case, he even became a movie maker. I mean, he became very well known. I remember once I was in the Amazon and there was a group of about 20 bird watchers from America, and they recognized him from the film Silent Hunter. And we spent an hour talking to these bird watchers and they were asking him questions. And so he's not only a tracker, but he's become a world-renowned conservationist. And, you know, this is a guy that's never had any formal training. You know, he's never been to school. Yeah. He's grown up in the bush. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's so cool to see how like tourists actually has such a positive influence on it.
Yeah. He speaks quite good English. So I'm going to put him in the seat when you're ready.
Nice to meet you. Very pleased to meet you. Maybe introduce yourself for our listeners. Who are you? Like, where did you grow up and what are you doing now?
Okay, so my name is Elmon Mfrong. We grew up in the bush and then we know the job for trekking only. And I haven't been to school. That's why we meet the JV and then he tried to teach me the English. Also, we passed my language to JV, speaking the Shanghai.
Wow.
So we've been to Kenya,
crash, all that.
and Zambia, and Brazil, and Zimbabwe. And with myself and JV, we got the accident for helicopter crash.
Oh, wow.
Oh, when did that happen? What happened?
95 in Zambia.
Wow. That must have been scary, huh?
Yeah.
How did you survive it?
So I think myself, I haven't seen that accident like that for helicopter. So I tried, because we take the door off, we film the buffalo. So we tried to jump myself. I saw helicopter turning around. So I tried to jump. And then my luck enough, as really was there in the crash, the helicopter, it started to grab me at my belt. It doesn't, that wanted me to jump.
Let me come in here. We lost the tail rotor in a helicopter, okay? So that's almost fatal situation. We had an incredible pilot. He had over 11,000 hours. But as we were going down, there were 5 of us in the helicopter. Elmon decided he was going to jump. Before we hit the ground, he was going to jump out. But the tracker in the middle, William Saboya, at the last minute held him in and kept him in the helicopter. So we all hit the ground together, yeah.
Okay.
And we all sustained serious spinal injuries, yeah. But that was Elmon's idea, that he was going to jump out of the helicopter.
Do you think this would have been a better idea? Maybe.
I think like that was better, but it's not a good one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. And that was in Brazil, or where was that?
Luangwa, Zambia.
In Zambia. Nice.
Yes.
Wow. And what is, maybe from your experience, one of your favorite moments throughout these years? Yeah. Maybe how was the transition from like seeing animals as like something you have to poach to something you have to show to people?
The area we grew up, and then also my father is one teaching us how can we track the animals, because that time we are hunting the impala and warthog like that, and to feed our family.
Yeah.
So when we meet the JV, and then I try to see myself, doesn't kill a leopard, doesn't kill the impala, because the impala and leopard is going to bring the people, and then to Londolozi or sometimes give us the tips like that, and then we saw, oh, this is a good money. They make money like that. Doesn't make money to kill the leopard. So they make the money to the guest can see the leopard, take the picture, and they leave the leopard alone. So get more and more people coming to see the one leopard and Londolozi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess that's a better return on investment than killing the leopard, right? So you can come back.
Yeah, because the leopard, or I can say all the animals like the impala and leopard, lion, everything. This is the gold mine. So everyone when myself we work there in Londolozi, and then he's want to give us the money. That money will support my family.
Yeah.
It come from all the money come from the leopard or lion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you kill it, I don't think maybe it can make money. But to kill it, some people can kill them impala or selling the meat, so small money. It can support you, or maybe it can hold your life. I don't think it can do like that. So if you don't kill it, and it can make more money.
Yeah. And even more support for the community as well.
Yeah. Yes.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, we need to spread the story all around.
I think you're a role model for many people in that regard. For sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for jumping on here. And
Yeah.
Totally.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, John, for bringing it on.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure.
That's amazing.
Great. I mean, here we already mentioned the leopards, right? I think that's also one part of what you've done in the past was like the rehabilitation and reintroduction of captive leopards and tigers in the wild. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe also from my question is like, why tigers in Africa?
Yeah, so to start with the leopard, when we inherited the game farm from my father, all the leopards were exceedingly shy. And for the first 5 years, no guest at Londolozi ever saw a leopard. The leopards were running and you'd see a flash of a tail and into the grass and they were gone. So there was no leopards hanging around. And there was just one female that we picked up, and she hung around for 2 or 3 minutes. Myself and Elmon were together. We had just started making movies at that time. And she gave us a brief 2 minutes of her time, and then she was gone. And we started following that leopard, and we went through a process which is called habituating. Now, habituating is, people will often talk about tame animals. An habituated animal is not a tame animal. A tame animal is something that's tamed in a circus and then taught to perform tricks and things like that. An habituated animal basically goes about its business. It does exactly what it does in the wild. It will allow human beings traveling in jeeps which are basically mobile hides,
Mhm.
to follow it and even to view it at its den and view it when it's mating and view it when it's hunting. So it becomes an exceedingly valuable animal because a guest can arrive from overseas. We can take them out into the bush and we can drive up to the leopard. The leopard may have a kill in the tree. And for 3 days, we can view that leopard
Mhm.
with our guests in the bush. And where I had the huge advantage is that mother leopard, with the tracking skills of Elmon, I was able to habituate that leopard.
Mhm.
And she then had 19 cubs, and they all grew up habituated because we were viewing them every single day. But the process of habituation took me about 5 years. I met the mother leopard in 1979, and only by 1983 was she fully habituated. And then the cubs were also grew up habituated. And then that huge industry that we have today in the Sabi Sand, Londolozi is part of the Sabi Sand,
Mhm.
that huge industry then blossomed out because other game lodges now had habituated leopards. The leopards dispersed out into other areas and the whole Sabi Sand. And today, virtually all the game reserves in South Africa have all got habituated leopards. So the film that we made, Silent Hunter, which won the Gold Award in the New York Film Festival, Silent Hunter, had unique footage. Today, it's not unique. I mean, a leopard kill today is not exceedingly rare like it was when I made Silent Hunter. And so that whole leopard viewing has become available to people around the world. And that is it's what we call a magnet. It's the gold in the gold mine.
Mhm.
Your leopard, your lion, your elephant, your rhino, your big five, your icon, dramatic animals. This is what attracts tourists, photographers, filmmakers from all over the world to come and view these animals. Ahead of the game, if you go to the Maasai Mara in Kenya and you pick up a cheetah, there can be 20, 30 vehicles following that cheetah. Londolozi doesn't do that. Londolozi only allows 3 vehicles at one time at one sighting. So you have your leopard, 3 vehicles, each carrying maybe six guests
Mhm.
will view that leopard, and then one vehicle will move out, another vehicle will move in. So we rotate the sighting. And so that's how we protect the animal against, the overexploitation by tourists. And that's
That
what
makes sense.
Londolozi probably done better than anybody else.
That's amazing. That makes it also quite exclusive as well.
Very exclusive, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then your second question, I followed for more than 10 years. I was watching the tiger, and I came to the conclusion. I went and interviewed many of the people in Project Tiger. I went to India, I went to Nepal, and I came to the conclusion, this is 20 years ago, that the tiger was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people.
Mhm.
And the tiger was trying to swim up a river that it could never succeed. At that time, India was 1.4 billion people. More than a third of humanity lived in the Asian continent where the tiger was trying to survive. And I came to the conclusion that the best I could do to help the tiger would be to do what's called an ex situ conservation project. And that's when you try to save an animal away from where it's being destroyed. And when I started my tiger project in the Karoo of South Africa, when I started, there were 8,000 wild tigers in Asia.
Mhm.
And when I finished 17 years later, when I walked away from the project, that number was around 2,500.
Wow.
And Tiger Canyons has been very successful. Tiger Canyons works on the same basis as Londolozi. It has the same ethics, the same values of involving the surrounding communities, uplifting the people. the tiger is basically a large leopard. So wild tigers now inhabit an area in the middle of South Africa, and ecotourism supports that population of tigers.
It's beautiful.
And that's basically what we've been able to do over a period of 22 years now, since we started that project. Yeah.
Wow. And they interact with any animals, I guess, there in the game reserve, right? Like, I guess, what do you see
Yeah,
here?
they're self-sustaining. No, they're not in the same area as the cheetah. We have cheetah in there, but the cheetah it's an area that's the cheetah on the one side and the tigers on the other side of the fence. We have a project right now which involves bringing 400,000 hectares together in one mega park.
Mm-hmm.
And inside that park will be lion, leopard, cheetah, and tiger, all self-sustaining, all interacting.
Wow.
That's the dream for the future, yeah.
And do these tigers and lions interact with each other in any like competing way?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. The tigers have their own area. The cheetahs have their own area. But the tigers all are self-sustaining. They hunt the prey, the wild prey. They are wild. They create their own territories. They fight for territories. They hunt, they mate, just like a wild tiger in Asia. Yeah.
So there's wild game in there so they can hunt themselves.
Yeah. All the indigenous game, blesbuck, warthog, springbuck, eland, red hartebeest. They are all the indigenous game in that area. The tigers hunt the indigenous game. Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing. That's cool.
So,
Okay, that would definitely be interesting to see as well, Jan, right?
yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
I can organize for you to see that project, not a problem.
Cool. That'd be amazing. We can spread awareness around that as well. Yeah. Awesome. And maybe like another interesting question. I mean, you had malaria 14 times. How were you able to go through these, diseases and illnesses?
Well, one of the worst areas for malaria is the Luangwa Valley. It's part of the Rift Valley. And that's an area where we virtually got malaria every single year. But I also got malaria at Londolozi. I also got malaria in Kenya as well. So that's one of the hazards that you have when you work in those kind of places, is that, malaria, it's part of the risk of operating in wild areas. And unfortunately, Luangwa is a very bad malaria area. I think probably of the 14 times I got it, I probably got it maybe 10 times in Luangwa. And the other 4 times I would have got it Londolozi, and I think I got it once. I got malaria once in the Masai Mara of Kenya. Quite a few times I evacuated myself, chartered a plane and flew myself to South Africa, and my staff as well. I had times when my staff were unconscious for 2 weeks and on a ventilator because of cerebral malaria. So it is a disease which is extremely dangerous and still today kills a lot of people in Africa.
And as like tourists can take for like a short amount of time a pill against it, right, to protect themselves. But
tourists can take the prophylactic, but also many of the tourists, they don't have the resistance. Living in Africa and having it 14 times, I probably have got more resistant. And a guy like Elman Mhlongo would have a much higher resistance to someone that maybe came from New York City or London. They wouldn't have the resistance. And so quite a few tourists have been deceived when they think it's like a flu symptom, and they think it's flu. And if you don't treat malaria quickly, it manifests into cerebral malaria, and then it's going to knock somebody that's born and bred in London, that's going to knock them out very, very fast.
Yeah. And then one other interesting comment that we saw was that you met Nelson Mandela. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, Nelson Mandela was in prison on Robben Island for 27 years. And a friend of mine was a homeland leader. During the time of apartheid, South Africa had pursued a policy where each tribe, the Zulu tribe, the Shangaan tribe, the Swazi tribe, were all given land. It's a little bit like the American reservations. And they were supposed to develop along those pieces of land. But those pieces of land were ecologically not viable. They were economically not viable. It was a disastrous policy that the apartheid government tried to pursue. Now, one of the leaders of those homelands was a guy called Enos Mabuza. And the South African government thought that Enos was one of their apartheid puppets. But in fact, Enos Mabuza was very, very high in the ANC. And he was working the system. But the ANC at that time was an underground movement. They were banned by the apartheid government because they were training soldiers in Mozambique and Tanzania and outside South Africa. But Enos and myself were just very good friends, and Enos would come and spend the weekend with me. He lived in Nelspruit. He was a homeland leader, and he would come and spend time with myself and Elmont just because he liked leopards. And he would hang out with us for the weekend, and then he'd go back, and he was head of the Swazi homeland, which was called Kangwani. And what the South African government didn't know, he was actually second in command of the ANC. So when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, Enos Mabuza brought Nelson Mandela to Londolozi. It was the first place Mandela came when he came out of prison after 27 years. And on a famous occasion, I sat with Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, who was later the president, Enos Mabuza, on my veranda with the little lion Shingalana was walking around. I just picked up the little lion Shingalana, and it was walking around. Nelson Mandela got down on his knees and greeted the lion by rubbing his head with the lion. It was an amazing time, yeah. And during that discussion, I wrote the first privatization of the Kruger National Park. And Enos Mabuza told me then that when Mandela came to power, when the ANC took power, that he would be head of the national parks of South Africa. And that is exactly what happened. And Enos Mabuza became head of national parks. And he asked me at that time if I would be his advisor, his environmental advisor, when he became head of the national parks of South Africa. And I agreed. Unfortunately, and many people had never heard of Enos Mabuza. Unfortunately, he died very young, 55 years old. And Enos Mabuza could have been the president of South Africa. He was that intellectual. He was very, very clever guy. He had a brilliant mind, and he could have been not only head of national parks, he could have been head of the country of South Africa. But he died very, very young, unfortunately. And I don't know if you know South African politics. The country of South Africa is in dire straits at the moment under the ANC. Yeah. So it was during that time. And then Nelson Mandela came back to visit me at Londolozi in another trip. And we were on a game drive, and we got a radio message to return to base urgently. And we raced back in the Jeep, and there was a message to phone Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the president of South Africa at the moment. And I called Ramaphosa on the phone, and he was in the peace talks. So when the transition of power was occurring between the apartheid government and the ANC, they had held peace talks. But Mandela was not at the peace talks. Leading the peace talks was Cyril Ramaphosa, who is now president of South Africa. And a radical right-wing group called the RVB, if you Google them in, they invaded those peace talks. They drove military trucks through the windows of the trade center, and they invaded and they attacked the people in the peace talks. And when President Ramaphosa, Cyril Ramaphosa, made that call to Mandela, he was under a table and you could hear the shots going off in the background.
Wow.
Oh,
And I was there, standing there, and as Mandela talked to him on the telephone. And basically, Ramaphosa said to Mandela, mobilize with Caesar. Now, Mkhonto Caesar was the armed wing of the ANC. They had been illegal, but they were now legal. And Ramaphosa wanted him to mobilize Mkhonto Caesar. He then put the phone down and he phoned de Klerk, F.W. de Klerk, the president of South Africa. He's now has passed away recently. And Mandela, and I was there, witness to the conversation, and Mandela said to de Klerk, I'll give you 2 hours to get the situation under control. And if you don't get it under control, I will mobilize Mkhonto Caesar. And if he had mobilized Mkhonto Caesar, that would have been the beginning of a civil war like you've never seen on the African continent. And then Mandela turned to me and said, I want a helicopter and I want to fly into the trade center. And that's when I said to him, Mandela, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. They're going to kill you, and then we will be in a civil war. And an argument broke out between the two of us. It was a heated argument, I must tell you. And I've written a song about it, actually, and I've got a voice-over guy to recreate that argument. And I persuaded Mandela not to fly in an helicopter to the trade center, to go to his house in Johannesburg, and I would organize for the SABC to send a film crew to interview him at his house rather than going into the trade center. And that's exactly what he did in the end. He flew back, went to his house, and a film crew went to his house, and he made the famous speech, which is in the Apartheid Museum, and it's a very famous speech. And when we were arguing, I said to Mandela, Mandela, you spent 27 years in prison. You go into the trade center now, they will shoot you, and those years that you were in prison will be wasted. Don't do that. And in that argument, I said the words, Mandela, understand that the RVB do not represent the opinion of the white people of South Africa. They do not represent me and my political thinking. Understand that, and understand it clearly. And that stopped him in his tracks, those words. And when he gave the famous speech, he said in that speech, and the RVB do not represent the white people of South Africa. And he appealed to everybody to stay calm because we were on the brink of civil war. I've never played any part in politics. I have no interest in politics. But that was the small part that I played in South African politics. I persuaded him not to go into the trade center, and I gave him those famous words, the RVB do not represent the whites of South Africa, which is in the famous speech that he gave, which has been recorded in the Apartheid Museum. So yeah, it was a very pivotal day in the history of South Africa.
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
That's crazy. And you kind of saved his life in the end with these words.
Possibly, yeah, because you know he was very hyped up. He shouted at me. He said, I am the leader of the people and I have to be with my people and they are under attack and I want to go there. And I phoned my friend who owns 4 or 5 helicopters. I said to him, Buzz, have you got a helicopter? He said, no, I do not have a helicopter. They're all at the trade center. CNN's flying one. The British BBC is flying the other. Everybody's flying over the trade center. Who wants the helicopter? I said, Nelson Mandela. He said, oh my God. He said, don't let him go there. Just persuade him not to go there. Yeah. He says, and anyway, I don't have a spare helicopter.
Yeah. Wow. And it was in 1990 or?
The ANC has been in power for 30 years. It's 30 years ago, whatever that was. Yeah. Okay. Before the turn of the century. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible story. And I think you also mentioned something. You're working on a new, musical. Is it called Alive? I think I saw your website, which is called John Varty Alive, right? So
it's called 9 Lives. Yeah.
9 Lives. Yeah.
The musical is called 9 Lives. It has 30 songs in it. It's storytelling, just like I'm talking to you. That's exactly the same as the way I'll talk to the audience. And that's the band that I've talked about, the professional band. Mm-hmm. I've just hired the best musicians I can find, and they will be practicing till the end of the year, and the band will be launched probably in January 2024. And we're hoping to tour nationally and internationally, come to the United States with our concert, which is called 9 Lives. Yeah.
Nice. We'll definitely try to see it. Thank you, John. And yeah, thank you for all of these insights and stories, John. I think for us and also for our audience, this was very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. I think an incredible story. I think I never met a person who've been, had malaria this often, went to the hospital so often. And I think, just been so active during his lifetime and still is there to talk about it, right? So I think that's incredible. Maybe, John, can you maybe let our audience know how can they support you or how can they support the causes? Like, what's something they can do to help?
Look, the best thing a person can do is travel to South Africa, come and stay at Londolozi Game Reserve, come and stay at Tiger Canyons, because by doing a safari, and supporting us, that's how we create jobs. That's how we uplift people. So that's the best thing you can do, is come to South Africa and experience a safari at Londolozi or at Tiger Canyons. I have foundations and all of that kind of thing, but I'm in the business of uplifting people that live around the parks. Mm-hmm. And when you come on safari, you basically support what I'm trying to do. So that would be my advice, yeah.
If you support the whole belt around the park, then there's literally not much space for poaching, actually. Poaching would succeed after a while.
Look, poaching is always going to be a problem because the human growth rate in the area where Londolozi is situated and the Kruger National Park, up around the towns of Hazy View, Acorn Hook, Bushbuck Ridge, the human growth rate is one of the highest on the African continent. The population is increasing rapidly. And it doesn't take rocket science to work out that the pressure on the parks is going to become more and more and more. Most of those areas are controlled by syndicates. In fact, the ANC government doesn't have control in many of the areas around the Kruger Park. They're controlled by syndicates. They're mafia-style syndicates. And those syndicates believe that they have a right to the wildlife, that it belongs to the people. And they should be allowed to hunt rhino legally and hunt elephant legally and sell the meat and sell the ivory and sell the rhino horn. That's their perception. And so that's a concept that conservationists are going to have to deal with. And if you have great wealth inside the parks and great poverty on the outside of the parks, then you've got a problem. Any country, you can study the statistics. South Africa, Mexico is a very good example. Some of the South American countries where you've got great wealth and great poverty hand in hand, you'll always have high crime rate. And so to combat poaching, you have to create wealth on the outside of the parks. Because if you have poverty on the outside of the parks, they're always going to be trying to take what you have on the inside of the parks. And that is the challenge for conservation. That's what I work with every single day. My band is an upliftment project. Those girls live right at the cutting edge of nature. If there's a drought, they have no food. If there are floods, the roof is leaking. If they have no power, they're in the dark. We've just been in the dark for 2 minutes. They're in the dark for the whole night. One of my band went to the toilet recently and she was trying to find the toilet paper and the snake bit her.
Oh,
now you've got a problem. She's been bitten by a poisonous snake in the middle of the night.
Yep.
Another one of my band went, the borehole dried up near her house. So she had to go to the river to get the water, to drink the drinking water and cooking water and washing water. And the crocodile attacked her. Actually, it attacked her friend, who later died of septicemia from the wounds of the crocodile bite.
wow.
This is the way they live. While we flick the switch and we have power, they don't have any power. They don't have any running water. They can't afford the food at the supermarket. The Ukrainian war, which I think is the dumbest war, all wars are dumb, but the Ukrainian war is just beyond me. I just can't believe that the Ukrainian war has forced the price of fuel up in South Africa by 40%. So now, the rural people, they can't afford to get in a taxi anymore.
Yeah.
So how are they going to feed themselves if they can't get to the supermarket? When they get to the supermarket, the price of the food is also up 40% because the price of fuel's up 40%. They can't afford to buy food. They can't afford to buy basics like mealie meal.
Yeah.
So where are you going to get food? Well, there in the Kruger Park is 8,000 square miles. There are 100,000 impala in there. There's 20,000 in Yala. There are 10,000 bushbuck. You can catch these animals and eat them. So, if you're starving and you're hungry, that's where you go. If you manage to kill a rhino, you can put 50,000 Rand in your pocket, which you can send your kids to school or buy yourself a second-hand truck. These are all things which I grapple with every day of my life.
Wow.
It's how to narrow the gap between the wealth on the inside of the park and the poverty on the outside.
That's a good point. Yeah. So again, John, thanks so much for being here on the show, on the podcast. Thanks for joining. I think incredible story. I think we both are deeply impressed by what you accomplished over the years. I think we also would love to maybe write a blog article about you, maybe get some of our writers involved there and, cover your story.
Sure, pleasure.
So, yeah, maybe,
And contact me when you come to South Africa, will you?
Yeah, maybe even Freddie will write it, and we'll write some articles about it. And
It will be a pleasure to host you and to show you around both my projects, Londolozi and Tiger Canyons. Yeah. So let me know like a week in advance before you arrive.
And since you have good cameras, we could probably do a live interview as well.
With a pleasure. It'll be a pleasure.
Nice.
That's
awesome. Good. John, it was such a pleasure talking to you. And let's talk soon. And I hope you have an amazing evening. Thank you.
All right.
John, thanks so much. Have a good night.
Tread lightly on the earth.
Will do.
That's the sign that the band gives for tread lightly on the earth. That's the J and that's the V. JV. Tread lightly on the earth. Yeah. Every time we talk, we'll give the tread lightly sign.
Love it, John.
Lightly.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good one.